sci-fi. So I'd really love to start. Maybe we could start talking about sort of your views on extra dimensional life, because I think, from my understanding is when we're talking about your experiences, we're not talking about, people, beings from other planets necessarily, but more from other dimensions, other sort of energetic realms that can come into this sort of simulation that we call reality, like holographic universe kind of stuff.
Well, I'm not at the point of making any conclusions about where they are from. I think that the question is very much an open one. They certainly are something, that is clear. But if you make a list of all the possibilities, it's long. The first possibility is it's simply aliens from another planet. That's an interesting one because for two reasons. First is it's clear that they don't have the same brain structures that we do, and they don't experience reality in the same way we do because their approach to us is too different from what ours would be to them. So that's a possibility. And however, what we can see of their social structures and their abilities suggests there's something very different maybe going on. I've often wondered whether or not they're human beings in the sense that there are various types of animal on the planet that have completely different forms. I mean, caterpillars and butterflies are a simple example. And perhaps that's part of this. Perhaps we are not the only form. And if you think about it, a caterpillar would be as mystified by a butterfly as we are by the visitors. So when they said to me, one of them said to me when I was protesting they had no right to do what they were doing to me, that we do have a right, I wondered if it was not because this was a human being with a human goals and so forth. Excuse me. Another possibility is that this universe is not alone in terms of its presence in reality. And I have certainly pursued that extensively because in summer of 2019, I was at or it was the summer of 2018, I was on the Lakota Sioux Reservation in South Dakota.
I was going to ask you about this. This is on my list.
Yes. And I experienced, well, we can get into that more deeply in a minute. I experienced being in two universes at the same time. And I have reached a point now where I can observe the other universe pretty much anytime I want to under the right circumstances. It's there and it's evolving and changing just like this one is. It's a real place, a physical place. And it has it's very much like this place, except in certain respects it's quite different, and I can enumerate those in detail because I've really seen a lot of it at this point. So that's a possibility, that they're from there, or that there is no way to answer the question of where they're from, that we don't have the capacity to define what they are. That's also a real possibility.
Having to reconcile with the mystery is hard, is a part of this process, is you're interacting with them and yet still you don't have the big picture, right?
I don't think it's possible for us to have the big picture, and I must say that the reason could be very simply one, it has to do with brain structures. A dolphin may be a highly intelligent creature, but he can't have the big picture of humanity. Conversely, we are highly intelligent, but there's nothing we can do, nothing,
Yep.
to really experience the meaning of the world in the context of the dolphin's brain. There's nothing.
Right.
And if you look at the way the world really works, there are all of these creatures in it, and each species is a world unto itself.
So true.
The elephant cannot know that the mouse is squeaking because the elephant's ears are not equipped to enable it to hear noises that high. The mouse cannot know that the elephant is trumpeting because its ears are not equipped to enable it to hear a sound that low. The elephant cannot see the mouse because the mouse is too small. The mouse cannot bring the elephant into its focus because the elephant is too large. Right. In other words, they can be standing side by side and not even know each other exists, right, until the elephant shifts his weight and suddenly the mouse doesn't exist anymore, and is left wondering what the heck happened. So this is the reality we live in. We are very much isolated in our own between our own ears, right. Very much.
Right. Right. So we really can't, it's sort of like that, the waking up from the dream within a dream. There's this whole other world out there that we can't conceive of with our brains and our five senses and the way that we exist in our consciousness right now. So we sort of have to filter that through our own perception, which is so limited. That's where intuition comes in a little bit, though.
Yeah, it does. Intuition comes in because you have nothing else. Mm-hmm. And intuition rides a different horse. Mm-hmm. Intuition bridges those gaps, mm-hmm, so that you can have a relationship, and often a very complex and rich relationship, mm-hmm, with a dolphin, mm-hmm, without knowing what they're thinking.
Yes.
You just you use intuition, and your dog and cat, they operate on that. That's their system. Yes. And if you join them, then you have a very good relationship without ever knowing what the world looks like to them.
Exactly.
Or what they think of you. And you don't need to. And they don't need to, because everyone's very much in love. Right. So the love bridges the gap.
Right. And that's what gets me so excited about intuition, because I feel like I'm trying to find the right words to describe it. Like, I want to say it's something like a universal language, because it's the language that we all kind of speak on some level. It crosses over the divisions of our minds, whether it's a pet or an animal or some sort of transdimensional life or another kind of being. And can I just say that one of the things that really struck me about this, sort of relationship on a deeper level is that you say that we can't coherently communicate with the beings from the other worlds. And I think that intuition and talking about them, thinking first in math, right? That's something you talk about, how you think that they think first in math. And that really made me take pause, because then you started to talk about how the maths kind of made these packages that became like symbols, and you could connect with symbols with your intuition. And then intuition started to feel like a bridge to me. It felt like a bridge between all these different minds and the way they think. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I think that it has to be a bridge, because there is no other. To give you an idea of how this works, early this morning, I sleep in a room with closed vertical blinds, and one of them is slightly open, so that I can see out and I'd like to be aware of the dawn coming and so forth. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, there will be a long line of sort of hieroglyphics hanging there, glowing softly. Mm-hmm. And at first, I tried. Oh, what does it mean? What does it mean?
Right.
And then I thought to myself, I can't know that. I have to let my intuition be my guide. Yes. And that's what they're there for. They're there to to make me aware of the presence of a communication.
Mm-hmm.
They may be nothing. They may just be arbitrary symbols that don't mean a single thing to anybody, but they are a signal, whatever they are. And so I just open my mind to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't try to understand them. I don't try to make linear sense of them at all.
Brilliant. Mm-hmm.
And now here we are sitting here, and that communication had something to do with this meeting. I'm quite sure.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have happened otherwise, because it was for this meeting and I know that now that I'm here, I know that very well.
Yeah, I felt that too. I felt intuitively, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'll be honest with you, the first time my first interview, I was really nervous because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get to meet Whitley Strieber. I was like, but as soon as I met you, there was just this calm radiance that I felt from you, and so comforted. And I don't know if that is an energetic connection with all of this stuff, but I feel that there is, when you tap into that sort of intuitive level, and with people who are doing the same thing, it's important, and there's something's going on another level, that the strings are pulled or whatever, having this mission to share this stuff with the world and get the message out. I was joking with my husband. I said, I think Whitley is out there on the forefront, like single-handedly working to tame like aliens, and he's doing this thing that people are so afraid to do, and yet you're there and you're open to it.
Well, there's a level of this that's very predatory and very physical, and you just have to get used to it, because I mean, yes, it's predatory and yes, it's physical, but on the other hand, nothing ever actually eats you. So here I am. Nothing ever actually eats you. So here alive. I am. And they're just aggressive.
Well, and
at times.
And so I'm not gonna lie, when reading your book, it's some parts of it, I was like, I'm not reading this before bed. This is the kind of stuff that, because it triggers me. It takes me back to some of my stuff too. But then I had this moment after I was sitting and reading it, and we were talking about the predatory nature. It was one of those paragraphs, and I went and got my bath, and I have a window in my bathtub, and I was looking out, and this hawk came up and sat in the tree, like right next to me. And I started thinking, wow, what a beautiful hawk. And this hawk comes to our yard occasionally. And I thought, well, a hawk is a predator. A hawk is scary. A hawk is, and then I started looking at my dog. I'm like, my dog is scary. My dog is terrifying. If I look my dog in the eyes, sometimes I got to look away, right? But we still love them. We still have relationships with them.
And
right?
The hawk is still beautiful.
And the hawk is still beautiful. Exactly.
But you're not the prey.
Right.
You're not your dog's prey. You're not your hawk's prey. You have been. We all have been.
A different dog, but yeah.
You're not your cat's prey, although your cat might dispute that. But they are still predators, and we're predators too. And they're comfortable with us. The dog and the cat are. The hawk is somewhat more wary, of course, and justifiably so. But the dog and the cat are tamed to us. We're tamed to them. We've been together a long, long time is the reason. Propinquity breaks down these barriers over time. And you have in the dogs and the cats and the humans, predators that can live together very comfortably in the same house and not prey on each other, hopefully.
Most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time, exactly. This is what's going on here. What's here is very predatory, and it's dangerous, but it's also not destroying us. In other words, we're still here. I'm intimately connected with the visitors, probably more than anyone else ever has been.
Yeah.
And I'm not being eaten at all. I'm still here. I have a rich soul. It's not being eaten either. And so, but it's a two-way street. They're predators from their world, their reality, and we're predators from ours.
Right.
So there you have it. I mean, we're all predators in that sense. uh, we just are.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean we're preying on here. They're not necessarily here to prey on us, and we're not equipped to prey on them. They may not even be equipped to prey on us, although some people suspect that they prey on our souls.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly have a very great interest in that level of human life.
Mm-hmm.
And
Our energy, you mean, like our energy, sort of like when people talk about spirits feeding off your energy? Is that like, what do you mean?
No, not exactly. They like to share our experience of flow of being in the stream of time.
Right.
And there are any number of reasons for that. One of them goes way back to a speculation by the astronomer D.B.H. Kuiper and the astrophysicist Mark Morris. I may have their job descriptions reversed, I'm not sure. In the magazine Science in April of 1977, they speculated that if someone came here from another world, and they didn't really specify was another planet or not, their knowledge would be so great because of their ability to get here that the only thing that they would be interested in here was what we had that was new to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that very much in the visitors. They want to experience our lives, and it feels very predatory until you get used to it. And then you realize that someone else can be sharing your experience of life without taking it.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the pleasure of experiencing everything new, always new, just like we do. Every second is new to us. I don't think that's necessarily, whatever they are, and I'm not going to speculate about whether they're ultimately from the physical world or not. Whatever they are, they don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And they like that. And I don't blame them.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they come near you, there's a tremendous terror that's involved.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with the fact that they're outside of the time stream looking in. And part of you knows that if you were to be touched by them in the wrong way, you would immediately know everything that's ahead of you.
Right. I remember
And
you
you
talking
would
about
become like a robot moving through a life that had, in effect, already been lived.
wow. And you, I love that. So because we, you know, when we talk about physics and the holographic universe and the idea that in some level there is no such thing as time, right? All of this stuff has already happened.
Right.
We have the luxury of, in our singular consciousness, being able to perceive the beauty of the drama that unfolds in time. But, you know, if they exist on another level outside of that, then wow, what a thing to be able to step into. And one of the things that you talk about, I've heard you talk about again and again, was this idea of kind of a communion, just because of the name of your book that you taught. Is this a kind of cosmic communion? Is that what's you feels like is happening when this happens?
Well, it's trying to happen, and you know, there's all kinds of obstacles. There are people who are controlling the information flow in such a way that it makes it very difficult for the general public to understand both the importance of this and its potential value. So that's a problem. And the difficulty of surrendering to their needs is another problem. It's very hard. And it feels like you're going to be annihilated. It's really appalling. But you know, you get used to it, and it's just, you know, like a bunch of horses, colts that they're trying to break and to calm down and to say, hey, listen, just calm down and it's going to be fine. But we'll have a wonderful time together. But right now, you know, we're pitching and bucking and running around in the paddock trying to get out. And you have Charles Fort realizing, God, it's a barnyard. But you know, where there's another level though, and that's where intuition comes in, I think. Yes. Because your intuition is telling you that you can somehow do this. You're not ever going to be able to figure it out rationally, but somehow you can do it. like, how is it that when I was a boy, I spent a lot of time on ranches in South Texas. I was a very different creature then. I was a wary little guy who jumped on the back of a horse immediately. I mean, I would not even hesitate to jump bareback on the back of a horse and ride him with his mane. Uh, and when they came time to break them, the first thing that the cowboys didn't want to do was to force them. In other words, to break them to the point of exhaustion, because that left you with a less good horse, especially quarter horses who were there to help you with the cattle. The quarter horse had to be part of a team, and if you bust his will, he's never going to really be a good teammate. So one of the things they liked to do was to put us boys on them first when they were, often the first thing that they had on their back after getting used to a blanket was a boy, because we were light. And of course, we all hoped that each other would get bucked off. And it was a slower process, but on those ranches that did it that way, their horses were better, and their quarter horses were better. Their roundups and so forth were better, because they had better teamwork between the horses and the men, and then later the dogs that came into. There were dogs in this, and so you had these 3 different species working with a 4th species, the cattle, and you had a whole symbiosis going on.
Right.
And I think maybe it could be one of the reasons the visitors showed up in my life, because they thought, he's done this before. He did this when he was a kid. He knows what it's about, and we're gonna just gently get on his back and get him used to us, the same way he did those young horses. And that's what's happening, and it's worked very well. I'm comfortable with them, and when they show up physically, we had a big fight last year because I said some things in my new book, Them, that they didn't like, and in their way, instead of trying to explain it to me, which they can't do,
right,
they they acted out. And when they acted out, I couldn't write, and I couldn't figure out what was going on and why I was having all this hostility going on. And there were things blowing up around the house and stuff. I've made videos of it, and I finally just left. I figured I went actually to another country, to some friend's house, and stayed with them. And I wrote most of the book sitting at their kitchen table with the teenagers playing rock and roll, the dogs capering around, and life going on, and the family life going on. And then there was this guy sitting over there in the corner typing and typing. But I figured it out, and I figured out why they were concerned about something in the book, and I fixed it. And it was concerning to them because it made them vulnerable in a way they couldn't handle. And it was a very fair thing. I mean, it was very fair. Once I understood what they were scared about, and they were scared, I thought to myself, well, there's no way I'm going to let this happen. I will not do this.
Wow.
And I managed to communicate the information without exposing the vulnerability. And now we're happy together again.
Wow. So that's what a fight looks like. That is a great story.
Yeah. Well, there's somewhere on my YouTube channel, there's some of the explosions were recorded by the video system. And I think I've got them up there. They were pretty dramatic.
What are they? Was it just things around the house or something?
No. I would be sitting and meditating, and suddenly there'd be this huge explosion outside.
Oh, wow.
And sparks would fly and everything. It was quite dramatic.
Wow, that is dramatic.
And the first one happened, I thought it was kids playing with firecrackers, because it happened in January a few years ago, right after New Year's. And I figured, well, everybody in the neighborhood knows, everybody knows I meditated at 11, and it happened at 11. And so, but then the next one was a whole different kettle of fish. It was a much bigger deal, it resounded over at least a square mile of the neighborhood.
Wow.
And it was really dramatic with a huge flash. And the strange thing was that the explosion occurred, then the flash came. So what was that? Obviously, it was nothing. It was no ordinary. Excuse me. Nothing ordinary about it. And then I realized, well, typical. They're trying to tell me something, but they're definitely overdoing it in the usual way, you know. And it went on for quite a while, actually, and got much worse until I figured out what it was, and then we fixed it.
Beautiful. So, I mean, it is kind of, you can really see how it works in parallel to things like the whole nature of intuition, because it's this inward thing. Like you couldn't write, you felt like there was a block there, right? And then things in the outside world start giving you signs that, okay, we need to fix something. And so if we can't use words and to communicate, these are the ways that the universe and the beings in it can communicate, right?
Well, I'm not a good channel because I'm too suspicious of my own imagination. So they don't have any way to channel things through me and communicate with me that way. I've got this implant, but it's a research tool. It's not a communications tool. Like there's nobody talking to me through it. It helps me in research immensely. That's why the books, ever since Afterlife Revolution, the level of the quality of the research in those books has become really high, and it is because of this thing. And I messed up this eye looking into the other universe, the mirror universe, too intensely. And
is that what enables you to do it? You think it's the implant that allows you to see that?
I don't know. I can't tell you that. I don't know. I can see it though, and I don't know anyone else who can.
Like you see it actually, not like intuitively.
Oh no, physically. I can close my eyes, and in the right places, not in this room, for example, in the right places, under the right conditions, I will soon see this other world in great detail.
Wow.
And it is there. It is no dream.
Is it always the same world?
Yeah, always.
I can
tell you loads of things about it, about its weather, about the probable population level. And one thing about it that's very striking is that what we think of as the Ice Age has not ended in that world.
Oh.
And it also hasn't had the kind of technological revolution that we've had. It's much more primitive physically. And at the same time, there's more than one intelligent species in that world, and they live together. It's as if it's a world where what I think of as the visitors are walking the streets and considered an ordinary part of reality.
Right. Wow. So you think they could be showing you where they're from? Is that
no? This is another version of Earth.
So it's
oh
here.
Yeah, when I was at on the res, when we passed over a stream on the road, if I closed my eyes, it was there, the same stream. I mean, it was it was clearly parallel. And
right.
the same is pretty much true here in Santa Monica. The parallel is, and there's a very profound emotion connected with this. It's extraordinarily poignant. But I have found that somebody really doesn't like me trying to enter it physically, which I've done a couple of times, because there's obviously an imbalance of some kind that this creates. And it could be quite dangerous, so they wouldn't be so upset about it.
Right.
But I thought that, now that you've showed it to me and I've entered it a couple of times, why can't I just live in both? The answer is that's not going to work, fella.
Nice try.
You always, we give you an inch and you take a mile. And so I'm content now with just having it kind of in my heart and in my mind, and having the pleasure of looking without touching.
Right. Having the knowingness that exists and that's an
Right.
element of reality.
And I exist in it too. And I think the reason that I can't enter it is that, it would be two of the same people. It would be impossible.
Right.
I mean, I know a lot about the Whitley in that universe. I know what he does, and he's a professor, and not a very well-liked professor either. He doesn't have the university he works at won't give him an assistant, a PA, and people are very amazed at the fact that he doesn't have that, and he's sort of an outsider. I guess I'm probably an outsider in both places.
Yeah, but we have common themes in our lives, right? I think
I think so too. Yeah,
we're working through. That's fascinating, and all of this stuff to me, there's two things that I want to ask you about before we wrap this up, and all of this seems to be leading up to the one thing that you mentioned about all of this. I think your wife had said something. It has something to do with our relationship with death, right? So
yes.
Talking about this is what you said. I had a quote here that I wrote that they are midwifing our birth into the non-physical world, which is their origin. So I'm intrigued by that, and I'd love to, if you wouldn't mind, just talking about that quickly.
Well, I think that what's happening here is that this planet is basically a pregnant woman, a beautiful pregnant woman, and her womb is full. She's ready to give birth. Now, what happens when a baby comes down the birth canal is it's a very traumatic experience, and then the baby bursts out into another world, and there are these shadowy figures around the baby trying to hold it up and help it and keep it warm, and it's suddenly very cold, and everything is very bright, and there's a tremendous amount of noise that wasn't there before. The baby has no idea what is happening, so the baby goes, "What?" It's scared to death. And that's where we're going to be shortly, because the planet will fail us. The waters will burst. That's why this is the age of Aquarius, the pouring out of the waters. The little fish of Pisces has been swimming in those waters for 2,000 years. And now that's done. The waters are going to be poured out. And this is going to be a hell of a mess for us. And there's going to be a completely new humanity in the end. The form it will take, I won't pretend to know, but it's not going to be this. The material world that we live in, that is the world of the caterpillar that we live in now, which everything is being eaten, is going to go. We will fall into a sort of a trance, I think. And when we wake up, we will fly.
Wow. Beautiful. So that's our transformation. And that
transformation, exactly. Yep.
I think that, it makes so much sense with so much that we're even learning about even in quantum physics, in the way that we understand these different alternate realities and our expansion of consciousness, and even with intuition, that we have this whole part of our brain that's ready to be birthed in the world as well. Like, I feel like the intuitive nature that has been sort of repressed or never developed or whatever, there's so much of that out there that I think could really be part of this transition of energetic thinking, instead of using this linear thinking that we're used to in three-dimensional reality.
Well, I want to, if we're concluding, I want to leave you with a story. I met a man, a comedian people may remember, called Bob Hope, who was he was a wonderful man. He did USO shows around the world during World War II, and he was a beloved figure. He also apparently knew a lot about UFOs. His house in Palm Springs was shaped very like a UFO, and I think that probably some president, probably Nixon was very talkative about this, and he probably had talked to Hope about it. And so I ended up being invited to meet him. And We talked about the visitors and that sort of thing. There's nothing that I don't keep secrets. That's not my job. So and I didn't say, oh, now, Mr. Hope, this is a secret and I'm not going to blah, blah, blah. I told him, I talked to him the same way I'd talk to anybody.
Right.
But I did ask him a question. I said, you have become certainly the most famous comedian in history and one of the most famous people in the world. And I'm wondering how you did it. And he smiled. He said, I just let it happen.
Mm.
And that's life. That is, if you can just let it happen and not fool around with your fate and let your intuition be your leader.
Amen.
You're going to have a good life.
Amen. Wise words. And that, that's something that I actually was just writing about in the book, because if we try too hard, if we force it, we try to use our thinking brain and figuring it all out, then we just end up working against ourselves and sabotaging ourselves. And we just
right.
life.
Exactly.
And I love that story. How was it meeting with Bob Hope? Was he funny?
I was just, no, his wife was there and they were very sweet. And I've forgotten, I don't know, I don't seem to remember Anne being with me. I was probably on author tour at the time. And no, they were just nice people. They were very nice.
Like
and
nice guy.
And he was very curious about what had happened to me. And I told him exactly the same thing I tell everybody else.
Wow.
He didn't offer anything of his own. He didn't say, well, I think this or know this or this happened to me or anything like that. He just was interested in what I had to say.
Wow. No, I guess you just never know where you're going to find connections with people and shared interests. So
no, I've met a lot of people, famous people, but most of them, the ones who are still alive, I promised every one of them that I wouldn't tell about the meetings. So I
really?
Yeah, they're all very secretive. They're very nervous about being shown to have interest in this. And so I just leave it alone. I don't really care. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Go on shows and say, X is interested.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So stupid. I couldn't care less.
People in this world would be the least of my concern. I'm more worried about
I mean, I couldn't care less about it. It's wonderful that some well-known people have had experiences and it's their business. They want to keep them to themselves. And I don't wish to be pulled into it if they ever do talk about them.
Right. Oh my goodness. And that's oh wow. Okay. So I want to this is a good transition into my last question, which I think really gets to the heart of what's behind all of this. And so when you talked about, well, the book's called The Illumination Code. So what a big thread through the book is light and the power of light and how important light is. And one of the things that really touched me in your book was when you talked about the presence and these incidences of light that somehow led to some sort. I would take that as to being a God presence within all of this, or somehow interwoven in this tapestry. So is there anything that you'd like to tell us about that?
Well, first, the incidents of light that are recorded in the New World are things like Moses encountering the burning bush and basically changing the world, and Paul being blinded by the light outside of Damascus, where he was going to persecute Christians, and coming out of it, one of the greatest theological leaders of the world has ever known. Those are incidents of light, and there are quite a number of them in the world. These are incidents in which light has affected human culture, and these incidents are in many different cultures. It's not just the West. And this light is the light of life itself. There are many different frequencies of light. This light is a very high frequency. It's extremely intense, and it's conscious light. Remember that Einstein, I think, very truthfully said, and correctly, we are energy slowed down. That's what the physical world is. It's energy moving at a slower speed.
Wow, yeah.
And if you just relax into it, let it happen. You can't look for the light.
Yeah.
You have to let the light be in you. Just let it happen, and it will. That's what intuition is. It's letting the light in by just opening the door and relaxing.